welcome back to another episode of Legacy Replay, a series where we take a look at classic games with a set of fresh eyes to see if they still hold up today. Last time we kicked things off with Ocarina of Time, and I had a blast playing through that adventure again after so many years. It was exhilarating to see what still works well to this day, and what feels dated compared to modern experiences. Today will look a little bit different, however, because the next game we're covering is one that I'd never played before. My exposure to RPGs is relatively limited, mostly just through Final Fantasy and Paper Mario, but I had always heard incredible things about Chrono Trigger.
I'm definitely one of those people that are spouting those incredible things. This game is either the greatest game of all time or the greatest game of its time. It's a game that's basically lightning in a bottle, or a perfect storm. It managed to connect with me as a child, but it also managed to impress me as an adult. And in truth, it created a standard in RPGs that made it so hard to match that slowly over time I just had to accept that nothing would be quite as good as Chrono Trigger. And if we were to allow video games to be respected on the same level as movies and music, to me, Chrono Trigger would be the Beatles or the Casablanca of video games.
And I can see why people feel that way. The soundtrack is legendary. The combat is snappy and satisfying. Heck, even the concept of time travel is a great theme to explore with this genre, and is utilized in some really unique ways. So while I always knew this would be a good candidate for Legacy Replay, instead of comparing my playthrough to a past version of myself, I'll be looking at it from a brand new player perspective. I knew virtually nothing about what makes this game tick before diving in. Let's break it down and see if it lives up to the hype. What struck me almost immediately after booting up is how fantastic the art direction is. Characters are so expressive, and the detail is very impressive for such limited pixel size. And after looking it up, I understand why. Akira Toriyama, the creator of Dragon Ball, was part of a 3-person dream team of this game's development, along with the fathers of both the Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest series. Wow, that's an elite package right there. And it really does show. In addition to how the game looks, down to its very fibers of game design, I was blown away with how tight of an experience it was. If there's one overarching theme that stuck out to me the most, it's the absolute sense of freedom given to the player. It's honestly pretty staggering how unwavering it is in that approach, and it sets the tone within the first few minutes of the game. As I left my house for the first time, I know it told me to go to the Millennial Fair, but I wanted to see just how far it would let me explore before gating my path and displaying a "hey, I need to go to the fair" text box or something. And to my surprise, the game never did that. It let me travel to every corner of the island. In fact, it knew some players would do this because in the next town over, there were NPCs ready to give me some tips and tutorials on how the combat works. Even once I did go to the fairgrounds, it let me run around and do whatever I'd like until the main attraction was ready. Chugging sodas, ringing the bell, fighting cat robots? Awesome. Little did I know, this section was specifically set up to blow my freaking mind at the trial a few hours later. Okay, so I don't know if I've ever seen a game pull off something like this as skillfully as Chrono Trigger did, and this is over 25 years ago. For the unaware, they think you kidnapped the princess because you both disappeared through a time portal, so upon your return they try to convince a jury you're a bad dude based on the actions you took during your time at the fair. So while I thought I was innocently eating some chicken, returning someone's necklace, and exploring the festivities, I was actually eating someone else's lunch, greedily picking up jewelry before checking on the princess first, and ignoring a sweet little girl's plea to help return her lost kitten. These tasks are innocuous enough that I didn't think anything of it as it was happening, but after hearing the prosecution's evidence, I was like, wow, yeah, maybe I am guilty. So a seemingly basic and carefree introduction sequence actually has lasting ramifications later on, which really sets up how important your decisions are throughout the adventure. In fact, I found this so intriguing that I started a new game again to see if I could change the outcome. And while you can't skip the jailing sequence entirely, if you do sway a not guilty verdict, you'll gain some extra goodies from supporters who think you're wrongfully imprisoned. That's amazing. Oh, and instead of breaking out of your cell, which is the normal way to play, you can also just sit there and await your execution, which will lead to a different scene where Luca storms in and saves the day. This game is chock full of optional events like this, and it actively encourages you to think outside the box and make creative choices. There's essentially no hand-holding whatsoever, other than a simple statement from an ally about where to head next, and there's almost always bonus content to tackle if you're interested. In particular, I loved the Hunting Grounds, which has virtually no story purpose, but lets you gather resources that you can trade the townsfolk for upgraded equipment. Or the fact that you can enter the sewer access early if you want the first time you reach the future, but it'll be much more challenging at this point since you're at a lower level. You don't have to do these things, but Chrono Trigger says, hey, you're a big boy, you can make your own decisions. Go for it, dude. This sense of freedom even extends to the combat itself. I really liked how it utilized the space of the screen and where baddies move around to use area of effect moves or slash them up in a row. Of course, you gain special techniques as you level up, but you can also combine maneuvers together with your various party members, which added endless possibilities in terms of how you can handle the many threats in your way. And bosses get pretty tough as you progress. There's never any hints or help if you're struggling, you have to experiment and try out different strategies. And if you die, you're greeted with nothing more than a simple death jingle and getting booted back to the title screen. Man, there's a sense of responsibility that comes with that. It expects you to grow and learn on your own. And really, this leads to way more satisfaction when you finally overcome. Eventually, you gain access to the epoch and the ability to travel to any time period at will. And just as you think it couldn't get any better, the last chapter before the final boss is where, in my opinion, the game truly shines the brightest. As I entered the Black Omen, this was the first time I really felt my progress being gated by simply not being a high enough level. I got straight bodied by this mutant guy, but instead of forcing the player to go do some monotonous grinding, it cleverly opens up the entire world for a gigantic bevy of side quests to take on at your leisure. And this accomplishes 3 major goals at the same time: exploring story beats that add more depth to the cast of characters, letting the player gather each of their ultimate weapons and best equipment along the way, and naturally leveling up over time so you can effectively handle the ending. And while essentially none of it is required, it really lets the game's creativity build on previous tropes and run wild. For example, early on you learn that your actions in the past have lasting effects when you go back to the future, by saving the queen, which brings Marl back to life. So later on, when a greedy mayor steals your moonstone and won't return it, you can travel 400 years prior and generously give some expensive jerky to his ancestor so that she'll teach her descendants to be more giving and take care of others. Now his whole life is different. His kids love him, and he graciously turns over the stone because he's a good person. Or when you first visit the factory, it teaches you that you can use the button inputs on your controller to type in passcodes and unlock doors. So when you enter a time portal that takes you to Luca's traumatizing memory of her mother's accident, and find out her name is the password to turn off the machine, if you think quickly and type LARA, you can actually save her from an untimely demise. You do gain a special item for completing this quest, but I found it much more rewarding just knowing that I prevented her injury, and seeing that she's safe and sound from now on. For a game from 1995, it did an incredible job at attaching me to its characters' lives and backstories. And having so many moments like this that are completely voluntary means that everyone's experience with Chrono Trigger is going to be different, as they carve their own path to the final confrontation. And that's all without mentioning the best and probably most defining feature: its multiple endings. Once you reach the end of time, which is about 1/3 of the way through the game, you're given the option of either continuing your quest to try and stop the apocalypse, or going straight to Doomsday and fighting Lavos yourself to finish the job. Now, of course, that's easier said than done since you're probably not nearly strong enough to take it down yet, and the fact that it's available early does add to the theming of freedom. But it's actually even more nuanced than that. Depending on which chapter you're currently playing through based on your save file, you can trigger one of 12 different endings if you beat the game. From little changes like whether you crash the epoch or not, to altering the course of history because certain events hadn't transpired yet when you decided to save the day. And as a way to make these endings accessible to more than just hardcore completionists who put in hours of grinding, this is basically the first game to popularize the use of New Game Plus, which allows you to play the game again with all your best armor, items, and current experience points. So not only will the whole adventure become faster and easier, but those endings will be a lot more manageable to complete. And the best ending by far is awarded if you beat Lavos from the very beginning of the game, right as you take a newly available teleporter during the Millennial Fair. This will unlock an Easter egg where the creators of the game talk about their favorite parts of development, or how the experience was for them. And it ends with the Dream Team themselves congratulating you and awarding an extremely fast credit sequence to match how quickly you beat the game. This whole aspect is truly something special, and a perfect way to encourage replayability with a new spin on the formula. And the length of the game is just the right amount to not feel overbearing on another playthrough. Everything is jam-packed into a 15 to 20 hour journey without a single ounce of padding so that no second feels wasted. Just masterfully executed. Chrono Trigger is charming, funny, and crazy addicting. There's a lot to love about it, but I think letting the player roam free to create their own stories is what sets it a cut above, and is honestly a bit of a lost art nowadays. Maybe I've just been playing too many modern Nintendo titles, but it feels like railroading the player to make sure they do exactly what you want is the new norm. Which is a real shame because part of the appeal of video games is to put your skills to the test, and see how the game reacts to your behavior. And Chrono Trigger may be the pinnacle of that principle in motion. After my playthrough, I can say without a doubt that it is a true masterpiece, even by today's standards. And that's without any bias or nostalgia swaying me one way or the other. It still holds up in 2020 exceptionally well. Now, of course, Chrono Cross somewhat continued the legacy as a pseudo-sequel, but I can see why people are still clamoring today for anything that might resemble what Chrono Trigger accomplished, and it looks like we might be in luck. Sea of Stars was announced via Kickstarter this year by Sabotage Studios, the inventive developers behind The Messenger. And if anyone could pull off an homage to what makes retro games like this so special, they're definitely the ones for the job. I can't wait to see more of the development process in the future. And if you're a fan of classic RPGs, I hope you'll put it on your mental calendar as well. She Says was right to call Chrono Trigger lightning in a bottle. There really isn't much else out there quite like it. From the prolific dev team to nailing the pacing and providing a treasure trove of secrets to uncover. And I'm so glad I decided to take a leap of faith and give it a go. If you've played Chrono Trigger, what were the aspects you loved most about it? Do you think it still holds up today as well? Or what would you change if you could? Let me know in the comments below and let's talk about it. Thanks for watching another episode of Legacy Replay. I am loving this series, so if there's another classic game you'd like to see me cover in the future, tell me that below as well, and I'll see you next time. Stay frosty, my friends.